Hello, I'm Ari Lax, and this week I'm going to be recording with Blue White Tron, which, as you can kind of see from a cursory glance, is a deck that's had a lot of changes with the bannings, unbannings, and just new releases over the last few months. So, talk about bannings. Tron dates back in Modern to the very beginning. The very first ever Modern Grand Prix featured Luis Scott Vargas and Jerry Thompson in the top 8 with Blue White Tron. Very similar list, actually, with Gifts Ungiven on Burial Rights. We'll get to that in a minute, but um, then people kind of figured out that you could Sylvan Scrying an Expedition map for Ayavugan, which was a straight up threat, and you could also use them to get Tron pieces, and the classic, green based Tron deck that we've seen in Modern over the last few years became basically the only list. Without Ayavugan, though, that deck has a lot of error, like a lot of bad cards to draw. You draw a Sylvan Scrying when you have a ton of mana. What's it going to get? It's not going to get a card that immediately ends the game anymore. Whereas this deck doesn't need Ayavugan. It's just like a normal deck that plays with normal amounts of magic cards. It happens to have Tron. Um, so that's the ban card. Unban, you get Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek. You can give Ungiven for Thopter, Sword, Crucible, Academy runes. So if they give you either Crucible or runes, you just get to the point where your runes is in play, and then you get back both halves of the or Thopter Foundry. Um, I think in theory the worst thing for them to give you is probably like Crucible, Sword, and you have to like cast Sword and jump through a bunch of hoops, but it assembles it in one shot. And then in terms of new stuff, we haven't seen a lot of Ulamog in this style of Tron, but really the big ad I think is Thought-Knot Seer. That kind of bridges the gap in this mid-game power level that this deck had previously been lacking, and which sometimes kind of fumble about on like a couple of the early turns. And Thought-Knot Seer really answers that problem just by being Thought-Knot Seer. Um, Honestly, I don't even think Eldrazi Temple needed to be legal in the format for this card to see play. It's just a good magic card. Moving along, we've got a decent amount of interaction, and you might notice, some cheaper stuff like Spell Snare as opposed to the more traditional Condescends. Um, this list is very much a aggressive Gifts Ungiven list, not necessarily a huge Tron list. There's only 2 Expedition maps. There's actually less than 4 of multiple Tron pieces. It's just kind of I will eventually get to this part if I want. I'm mostly a Gifts Ungiven deck. Um, so Path to Exile super efficient. Remand great against the Return of Ancestral Vision. Spell Snare just generally a good card in Modern. If you're looking for like efficient one mana removal that does its job, that's one of the better ones. Um, we have a big split of all the different Wrath effects. You need at least 3 so you can gifts for at least 1. Terminus having a higher upside than Day of Judgment, just for being in your deck, especially because by the time oh, I got Terminus for a sweeper. Well, guess what? We're already looking at 4 or 5 mana on board. You just like EOT gifts on tap Terminus most of the time, whatever. The downgrade on mana cost of Day of Judgment is not worth it compared to the potential upside this card adds in a lot of levels. Card drawing, Gifts Ungiven, and Thought or Thirst for Knowledge. Generic good blue card draw. We're not ancestral visioning. We just need to spend our mana and get our good cards in hand. And Thirst, has got a lot of stuff to discard. So there are a lot of finishers in this list. A little more than I usually like. So we've got Crucible, that's part of the gifts package. Ulamog, just big dumb creature. Emrakul, bigger dumber creature that you can just get 4 big giant creatures with gifts in some spots in this deck. I'm not sure Emrakul is really the right one. It might actually be better to be Kozilek just because of mana concerns, but we'll see. Iona, that's one of your better Unburial Rights targets. Elishnor's the other one. A lot of decks in the format are just locked out by that. Mindslaver for the eventual Academy Runes lock. Uh, that's a little bit harder in this configuration to assemble. You can't just straight up gifts for it anymore without the second, where is it, Academy Runes. So usually you could, in some of the older lists, you could gifts, you could get Mindslaver, Crucible, Expedition Map, Academy Runes. Then you could, if they don't give you runes or Crucible, you slaver them, play the map, get your Academy Runes, and go off. The combo being that you get to sacrifice Mindslaver, then Academy Runes, and back to the top of your deck every turn. So you take all of their turns and win the game. Thopter Foundry Sword combo, we kind of went over that. Gives you a nice little bridge in the mid game sometimes. Again, similar to Thought-Knot. This shuts out a few decks that you sometimes have trouble closing out on. And then Unburial Rites, so the combo with gifts, for those of you who aren't familiar. Um, so the rules in Magic work such that if you are searching for a specific thing in your deck, you can choose, like, you can fail to find it, right? Like, you could in theory not have that. Um, and because the other, like, the alternative is like you have to reveal your whole deck to your opponent to show that you don't have it, which is just nonsense. You always have the option of whenever a search specifies a type of card to choose not to find that. So Gifts Ungiven, says cards with different names. So like imagine the scenario where you Gifts Ungiven with 4 cards in deck, but it's 2 swamps and 2 islands. You couldn't find 4 cards then. So your Gifts Ungiven allows you to choose less cards. Um, in this specific case, you choose exactly 2 cards, and your opponent chooses those 2 cards and puts them in the graveyard. The rest of 0 cards go to your hand. So you Gifts Ungiven for 2 cards. Those 2 cards are Unburial Rites and a creature. And then you untap and you Unburial Rite your creature. So it's basically, end of turn you pay 4, untap you pay 4, and you get to make Iona or Elesh Norn or Ulamog, which is pretty powerful. Locks out quite a few decks on the spot. Infect is never going to beat this card. Affinity is never going to beat this card. Various combo decks aren't going to beat this card. Not the best against like Jund or whatever, but in theory that's what the Thirst for Knowledge is, and all the rest of your deck's supposed to be fighting. Moving to lands, again we're light on actual Tron pieces because we're more of a Gifts deck than a Tron deck. 2 maps, only 10 Tron pieces. We do need to support our interactive spells early. We got Academy Runes and a Ghost Quarter to go find. You can Crucible for the Ghost Quarter. That's a setup that you can run. If you go Crucible, Academy, Ghost Quarter, and a Gifts pile, you can at least get a piece of land destruction on the spot. And then as for the actual mana, if you ever need to get basics, you can do so. Snow Covered and regular split. Sometimes comes up when you're going like, oh, I need to get like Hallowed Fountain, Flooded Strand, Plains, so I can have multiple white sources if I'm stuck off of double white for my Supreme Verdict. Um, Also, Celestial Colonnade is a benefit of playing this heavier blue-white mana base is that you actually get to have a control finisher, as opposed to just playing lands that are lands. And then Azorius Signet, most powerful mana source, filters Tron mana into colored mana. You do need to ramp in this deck. Your cards can get a bit expensive. In theory, if you are heavy enough on the 1-drop interaction, which is deck's getting close to, Talisman of Progress is potentially better, but you don't really want to split because I can't actually imagine searching for both at the same time. Then we move on, and we have our sideboard here. I've kind of split it up into gifts targets versus not gift targets. We've got Big Giant Idiot in Ugin that you can board in and set up cool gift stacks with, or just draw. Tectonic Edge as another land destruction land you can find with the Crucible setup. Engineered Explosives, just a sweeper that you can find that way. Disenchant and Purge, just spot removal that you can filter in with Pass and similar other setups. Terracodon, a different big idiot to find with Unburial Rites. Just blow up all their lands or make 18 power, your choice. Generally pretty powerful. And then we've got multiple Timelies you actually have to beat Burn. Multiple Negates and Dispels beating combo. Multiple Surgicals beating the other combo decks. This card's pretty good against like Griselbrand or whatever. And then other Thought Nuts here, just another big thing to board in to smooth out the numbers whenever you need to. Though honestly, it's possible I could see myself going up even further on that card after playing it. But that's what I'm about to start to figure out exactly where I want to take this deck, because it's doing a lot of powerful things. It's gotten a couple more powerful things, and I really like the feel of Thought-Knot Seer. And I think that this deck, this list, this is a week 1 list from the top 16 of the first modern classic with these cards legal. And I think that, it's hard to refine a Gifts Ungiven deck on week 1, but this is doing a lot of the right things.